All right, we are live. Hey, everybody, Justin here. I'm hoping the Wi-Fi is not going to drop out on this one, but I want to do something that I've been wanting to do for a while, and that's do another album ranking. I've only done one so far, and it was last year. I ranked the studio albums of Toto, my number one favorite band. Um, Now today, and I want to do more of these for some of my other favorite bands and favorite artists as I get around to them and as I think about them. So this will be a whole nother series. And I think I'm going to call the series Music and More. So anything that doesn't involve um, gear reviews or, me working in the studio will probably go under the Music and More series. And once I get enough of them, we'll create a playlist for them on my YouTube channel. But this one, I wanted to go ahead and rank the studio albums of another band that's probably my number two or number three, probably my number two favorite band. Um, and that is progressive metal legends Dream Theater. Now, I've gotten to see them twice on two different tours. They are amazing live. I will say they're not for everybody. There's a lot of really fast, like, virtuosic style playing, and it might go over a lot of people's heads. Oh, they're just playing for the, playing fast and playing tight and doing all this crazy stuff just for the sake of doing it. But it's what they do. Um, and like I said, some people love them, some people are not into this kind of music at all. Um, and I will say it was a slow grower for me. It took me maybe a year or two to really get the brilliance of them. And also to start with the right albums and the right music as well. Because all their albums, surprisingly, are pretty different. Different directions and different, things happening um, on each of their albums. So if you wanted to get into a band like this and see what they're all about, and you pick, the wrong album, it's probably going to turn you off from that band. So there is, a starting spot that you really want to, try to zero in on and try to go for their most popular albums. Those are probably going to be the more well-rounded, where you get a little bit of everything, that that Dream Theater are all about, or that any band is all about. So any band might have a sweet spot in their catalog that you might want to start with. But in other cases, you might want to start at the beginning of the discography and then go from the beginning all the way up to kind of where they are today, so you kind of see how things evolve over time and the different directions that they go in. Um, with Dream Theater, there are a couple of spots that I would pick to start and then kind of go from there. But we'll talk about what each album offers. So yeah, like I said, this one will be a fun one. And if you're a Dream Theater fan, I invite you to go ahead and comment after we go live, or even go into live chat if you want to, if you are familiar with their discography, and rank these along with me. Um, or like I said, if you're watching this on replay later on after this goes up, believe today it's the 24th. Yes, March 24th. 2026. It's a little after 9 o'clock Eastern time. So, just a little bit of history. Dream Theater are a progressive metal band, so they combine progressive rock with a little bit of the metal side. So think Rush meets Iron Maiden as my Wi-Fi goes out. Those were their two big influences when they were, getting together at Berkeley. So John Petrucci and John Mayung, the guitar player and the bass player, decided to go to Berkeley in 1985, and they met their drummer, who would become their drummer, Mike Portnoy. And they used to jam in a practice room, and they would do like Rush and Iron Maiden and all this other stuff. But they were also into, more progressive stuff. So they were Yes fans, Dixie Dregs, and that kind of thing. And they kind of they kind of combined it all into their own original sound. The original name of the band is Majesty, and there's all kinds of interviews on YouTube as to how they came up with that name. They ended up having to change the name due to another band that had the same name right before their first album came out. But they've got 15 studio albums, and we're basically going to rank them from my least favorite to my most favorite. And I'll talk a little bit about what I like about the album. I will say that um, my bottom five are in my bottom five for various reasons, but the top 10 are really, really close together. Um, there's not a whole lot separating, those. But with that in mind, let's get started. So my number 15 is going to be their debut album, When Dreaming They Unite, which came out in 1989. So this was released on Mechanic Records, which was a division of MCA. The also featured their second vocalist, a guy named Charlie Dominici. If you listen to his voice, he's very similar to like Steve Walsh from Kansas. He kind of has that tonality to them, but you can tell right away it's not exactly the right voice for this band. And they would realize that, just a little while after the album comes out, because he was let go and replaced, I think like 3 years later, 2 or 3 years later, by their current singer, James LaBrie. But if you listen to this album, it's not produced very well. You can tell it was made, on a budget. It doesn't have the polish that their future albums would have. But it does have, if you're a hardcore Dream Theater fan, it does have some classics on there. Like the ones that stand out would be, at least for me, would be A Fortune in Lies, Yitzhak Jam, which is the instrumental, Afterlife, and then Only a Matter of Time. Those four are like the standout tracks. But you can tell, like when you listen to this album, this is where they were at the time. And if you were going to start their discography and start there, then you could hear how, things change a little bit. They get more tighter, and they kind of really learn how to craft their songs into, what you would hear on later albums. But yeah, for me, Charlie is not the right singer for this band. His voice is a little bit of a turnoff for me, and also the production quality is not the greatest compared to some of these other albums. So number 15 is going to be When Dreamin' They Unite from 1989. Number 14, we're going to go to 2016 for the double album concept rock opera, The Astonishing. So this is the third studio album with Mike Mangini on drums. So Mike Portnoy left the band from 2010 to 2023. Was replaced by Mike Mangini for those 13 years, and for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think 6 studio albums. No, 5 studio albums, excuse me. Yes, 5. So this was the third of those albums with Mangini on drums. So this is about a 2 hour and 10-minute rock opera. It's set in the future, in like dystopian, New England kind of thing. And it kind of is like they were trying to go for 2112 meets, Game of Thrones, and try to make it a cool, like, fantasy kind of rock opera. The thing is with it for me, and I liked it when I first got it, and I spent a good amount of time with it. Um, but for me, there's not really any one song that stands out. And there's not a lot of really complete songs on the album. There's a lot of like parts, like maybe a verse and a chorus or something like that. Anyway, Wi-Fi is going to keep going in and out because the Wi-Fi is complete garbage here. Anyway, so there's, there's a lot of little tiny pieces. There's no song over like 8 minutes long. There is that. There's these interludes made by these noise machines called Nomax, and they're like, supposed to be really jarring, annoying, electronic, music. It's as if, AI took over in, 200 years from now, and music was done by like, robots and not, humans. But that's kind of the setting. But for me, it's a daunting listen. I think if I was gonna go out on like a 2 hour bike ride, or if I was gonna be in the gym for that kind of time, then I would maybe put it on. Um, but there's no real songs on it that stand by themselves. Unlike, some of the other concept albums that we're going to talk about a little later. It kind of has to be listened to as a whole from beginning to end. And like I said, 2 hours and 10 minutes. Yeah, it's a chore to get through. So that's number 14, The Astonishing from 2016. Number 13, I'm going to go with 2021's A View from the Top of the World. This is the last studio album with Mike Mangini before the return of Mike Portnoy. So my thing with this album, I listened to it when it first came out, and to be honest with you, I don't really remember any of it, other than maybe one, two, maybe two songs, maybe three. Um, and it could be, maybe I haven't spent enough time with it. I think it's one of those slow grower albums for me, but I don't really remember anything from it. Upon, I would say I think I listened to it like 3 or 4 times. And it's kind of disappointing. I mean, the Alien is the standout track. That was the lead single. It's also so far the only single that won Dream Theater a Grammy. So the Dream Theater been nominated, I believe, for 4, and they won for I think Best Metal Performance or something, and they won for the Alien. I would say that tune is probably the most memorable song on that album. I remember like maybe the one of the lines in the chorus from the title track, and maybe one other tiny little thing, but it's just not as memorable as some of their other albums. It's not as catchy, not as hooky. But like I said, I think The Alien is probably the most memorable thing on that album for me. So for that particular reason, number 13 is A View from the Top of the World. Number 12, we're going to go to 1997, Falling into Infinity. And by the way, before I forget, I'm not counting the Change of Seasons EP because that's an EP, not a full-on studio album. I will say, just the title track alone is very good. I'm not a fan of the covers on that particular EP, but that aside, Falling into Infinity is the only studio album with Derek Sherinian on keyboards, and we'll get to why he was in that band for the time that he was a little later. So they were kind of put into limbo after a change of seasons by the record company. Like, apparently they made a bunch of changes, and the people that were there for their first couple of albums at, Atco / Atlantic / East West were not there, any longer, and they weren't familiar with the contract that Dream Theater had, and it took them, from 1994 to 1997, other than Change of Seasons in 95, it took them 3 years to get them back in the studio and do another album. There are conflicting stories on, the making of this album. Some of the band members believe that the label was kind of putting a little bit of pressure on them to come up with, the hits, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, about, what I mean by that. They only ever had one hit, and if you know, you know. Um, but the label wanted them to, kind of concise things, make things more concise and make things more, more radio friendly. We need more, singles and things like that. Um, and to me, it's a more commercial version and a more accessible version of Dream Theater. It still has the prog, some prog moments on it, like in a song like Lines in the Sand, which features Doug Pinnick from King's X on background vocals. Um, but I would say, for me, standout tracks would be New Millennium, which I believe is the opener of the album. The demo version of You Not Me. If you listen to the demo of that, which is called You or Me, and then listen to the finished track, you can hear a huge difference with the chorus. So part of the making of the album was John Petrucci going to visit Desmond Child to, co-write, the song that would become You Not Me. And there were a couple of other, like Burning My Soul and Hell's Kitchen. So Hell's Kitchen was originally the middle section of Burning My Soul, and the producer of the album, I believe, is Kevin Shirley, produced that album, took the middle section out of Burning My Soul and turned it into what would become Hell's Kitchen. The other kind of big single from that is a song called Hollow Years. The demo version actually has a slightly longer pre-chorus to it. And I got to see Dream Theater perform that version of the song on the last, on the 40th anniversary tour, which was kind of cool that they pulled that out. Kind of a little Easter egg, or what the band calls a nugget for, their hardcore fans. I mean, I like the song. It's a, great song, but if you hear it live, just amazing guitar work from John Petrucci. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, so I'm going to put Falling Into Infinity at number 12. Number 11, I'm going to go to A Dramatic Turn of Events from 2011. This is the first album with Mike Mangini on drums. So here's what happened. In 2010, I think it was September of 2010, Mike Portnoy left Dream Theater. He was kind of getting burnt out because the band was on this, write, record, tour, cycle. And he needed a break, but the rest of the band was really eager to get back into the studio and start writing again. So he ended up having to leave. He ended up, leaving the band for 13 years. So they auditioned 7 different drummers. And this is captured on a documentary, a 3-part documentary that's on YouTube. And they ended up picking Mike Mangini, who is absolutely incredible drummer. Like, I've never seen anybody play like him before. But so this album was written without him. He was basically kind of given programmed drums, but he was allowed to kind of add his own twist into it. So the album was written without him. The thing that puts it at 11 for me is the production. So it was mixed and mastered by Andy Wallace, who's, I would say, one of his biggest credentials as a producer was Linkin Park's first couple of albums, and I'm not a fan of his. I'm not a big fan of his whole wall of sound production. There's like no dynamics. You can barely hear John Mayung's bass anywhere on that album. It's just like in your face the whole time. And it's a really tough listen because of that. Because of that production. I think honestly, if it were remixed, it probably would be a better album. The other thing is, if you listen to that album and listen to Images and Words, you might find in some songs that there's a formula that they're following that, I don't know, coincidentally kind of lines up with some of the songs on Images and Words. Like the lead single from Dramatic Turn of Events, which is On the Backs of Angels, has a lot of similarities with Pull Me Under, which we'll talk about in a little bit, for an example. But yeah, because of the production, that's why A Dramatic Turn of Events is sitting where it's at in my list at number 11. It's really hard to listen to. But you listen to any of the live versions of any of those songs, they're better mixed, they're just better produced, and again, they're easier to listen to. So that's number 11. All right, now we get into the top 10. And like I said, these are really, really close for me. There are still a couple of things. A couple of little quirks here and there, which we'll talk about, on one or two of these albums. All right, so number 10, I'm going to go with Dream Theater, which is the self-titled album from 2013. This is the second album with Mike Mangini, and the first one where he's involved in the writing process of the album. Very, very solid and, strong album. I would say I rank this, and you'll hear it. This is like, as I'm ranking these, I'm also ranking the Mangini era albums. This is basically the second, my second favorite of the Mangini era. Really based on the songs alone. You've got I think two instrumentals, which would be the first time Dream Theater's put an instrumental on their album in 10 years, because prior to that, Stream of Consciousness on Train of Thought in 2003 was the last time they recorded an instrumental on one of their albums. So you have the opener, False Awakening Suite, which was kind of written to open the tour. And if you see any of the any live footage of that tour, you'll have that opening. And then also Enigma Machine, which kind of sounds like a cool, like really heavy James Bond theme. So really, really cool there. But you really hear the gymnastics of Mangini's drumming, really come through on that album. Very, very strong album. Standout tracks for me would be The Enemy Inside, which is the lead single of the album. Got to see them play that with Mike Portnoy on the not the 40th anniversary. No, I think they did that on the Parasomnia tour. If you look on YouTube, Mike Portnoy's playing, doing a couple of the Mangini era songs, which I find really, really cool to see that. To see that they're still embracing that part of their catalog. But yeah, The Enemy Inside. There are two songs that stand out: The Looking Glass and Surrender to Reason. They both have a very Rush vibe, so you can hear the influence from Rush really coming out, on those two particular tracks, especially. Also, I really like The Bigger Picture, kind of a more ballad kind of song, and then the epic on that, which is Illumination Theory. That epic just takes so many cool twists and turns. You got a big string section in the middle of it, really kind of slows things down. I like this album quite a bit. Really, really like it. I need to revisit it, actually. It's been a while since I've heard it. All right. So that was number 10, Dream Theater from 2013. Number 9, I'm going to go Distance Over Time from 2019. My favorite of the Mangini era albums. So really strong song-based album. There's no song over maybe 8 or 9 minutes long on here. So if you're somebody that's not a big fan of, if the long, like 12-minute or 13-minute songs turn you away from listening to Dream Theater, maybe this might be an album to check out. Production is great on it, other than there's really, really heavy auto-tune / pitch correction on James LaBrie's voice. I think they went a little too heavy on it for this album compared to some of the other ones. I would say especially especially Dream Theater self-titled, and also The Astonishing. Um, yeah, but anyway, um, really, really strong material on this album. I love Paralyzed is probably my favorite track on it, and it's not very proggy. It's a really heavy, straightforward metal tune. It's got kind of a sludgy kind of riff to it. Not overly long, like 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. Um, like I said, it's a straightforward song, and that's one of the things that Dream Theater does really well is when they write concise, straight ahead, formatted songs, like a typical pop song, they do that really well. As we'll talk about in a little bit. So yeah, I love Paralyzed. Fall into the Light has a very has almost a Metallica feel to it. In some spots, especially the main guitar riff. You have Room 137, which is the only lyric written by Mike Mangini. And there's a really cool story about that song that's floating around YouTube, where Mangini talks about the inspiration for that, and it's really cool the way that it works. But yeah, my favorite is Paralyzed. My close second favorite is the lengthy Pale Blue Dot, which is inspired by the photograph Pale Blue Dot. And if you're a science, kind of guy, if you're really into, astronomy and outer space, I would really check that song out. Um, so yeah, I quite like Distance Over Time. Like I said, other than, the excessive pitch correction, which I don't think they needed on that. Um, that's a very strong album. All right. Number 8, this might be a controversial pick for, hardcore Dream Theater fans, but I have a reason why I've got it here. Number 8 is Images and Words from 1992. This is the first album with James LaBrie on vocals. After, I think, 2 or 3 years of them trying out, many, many, many different singers, and then ultimately getting a demo tape from Canada from a guy named Kevin James LaBrie. And when he joined the band, he dropped his first name to avoid being confused with Kevin Moore, who was the keyboardist in that band at the time. So why is Images and Words at number 8 when it should probably be maybe in my top 3? Really, it's got to do with the same issue that Portnoy, the drummer, had, which was using drum triggers. So, if you listen to, I can't remember the other album that David Prater produced around the same time, but it's the same kick and snare samples used on this other album that he produced that he put on Images and Words. And yeah, it bugs the crap out of me. Like, why did he not just use a normal? Like, I get it. No, it's a producer. That's my sound. I gotta have that. But anyway, aside from that, there are many, many, many classics on this album. I could probably rattle them all off. Let's see. You have Pull Me Under. So here's what happened. So all of a sudden they put this album, so they get this record contract for Atco, but they've got to basically Atco had to buy out the Mechanic deal, and they had to pay a lot of money to get out of that deal. But think about it, Mechanic didn't do anything with the debut album. There were apparently a lot of promises being made, like, oh, we'll do videos, we'll put you on tour. None of that ever happened, and when Dreaming Day Unite kind of didn't go anywhere. Maybe picked up a little bit of steam after Images and Words comes out, but as soon as that comes out, all of a sudden, who would have thought that an 8-minute song called Pull Me Under would, catch on to, rock radio, and then they quickly make a video for it. They make a couple other, I think a couple other videos. I think they did one for Take the Time, which didn't do as well, but still the album, sells, and I think it's their I think it's their highest selling album, if not maybe their second highest. Um, but yeah, so you start off with a song like "Pull Me Under," and that's the thing that gives them kind of their break, um, and gives them that that push that they were looking for. Um, so you have that. You have Another Day, which features Jay Beckenstein from Spyro Gyra. So the album was recorded at Bear Track Studios, which was owned by Mr. Beckenstein. So he appears on Another Day playing some soprano saxophone. And you know what? It works on that song. I don't find anything wrong with it at all. A lot of people might not like soprano saxophone in a metal song, but it works. It really does. I quite like it. Then you've got Take the Time, classic, classic, classic song. Surrounded, which might be my favorite tune on the album. Then you get Under a Glass Moon. You get Wait for Sleep. Learning to Live. There's just so many great, songs on this album. Yeah, it's a very, very strong album. I would say, if you're looking to get into Dream Theater, I highly recommend Images and Words if you can look past the triggered, drum sounds on this particular album. Um, all right, but anyway, so that's number 8. Number 7 is going to be Awake from 1994. This is the last album with Kevin Moore on keyboards. He announced that he was leaving the band actually right as the band was finished recording the album and right before they were going to mix it. He says, "All right, I'm done. I'm out." And you can hear in some of the lyrics, you might hear some kind of hints on the deteriorating, relationship between Kevin and, the rest of the band. Um, but, this is a very strong album. First use of a 7-string guitar by John Petrucci. So they were going for a heavier, darker, tone on this album. It starts off with 6 o'clock, and then you've got Caught in a Web. A great 1-2 punch for this album. Then you've got Innocence Faded. Then you've got the 3-part A Mind Beside Itself. So Erotomania, Voices, and The Silent Man. And then you've got The Mirror. I got to see them play that live on the 40th anniversary. Into Lie. Very, very cool. Another cool 1-2 punch on that album. Then you've got the beautiful, hauntingly beautiful Lifting Shadows Off a Dream. Then Scarred. And then Space Divest, which was basically a Kevin Moore piece. Still a great, great album. Yeah, I quite enjoy that album. I actually found myself listening to that one more, in recent years. I've actually got it on cassette. The cassette version, I don't think I think it has all the tunes. I think they're just in a different order because you've got to basically split it up between side A and side B. But yeah, it's a great album. All right, number 6. I'm going to go with Systematic Chaos from 2007. So this album was basically the band takes the summer off in 2006. They get back to the studio in September, I believe, and start recording this album. And the idea was originally, I believe, Mike Portnoy had a couple of concepts, but he decided not to bring them up and just kind of see what happens. So you kind of get a little bit of everything on this album. It has an opener, a 2-parter in a song called "In the Presence of Enemies," which opens the album and then closes the album. So it bookends the album, similar to "Shine on You Crazy Diamond" from Pink Floyd's "Wish You Were Here." So that's a highlight. Constant Motion. There's a line in there called that goes "Random Thoughts of Neat Disorder," and that's where the title of the album comes from. And also the word chaos appears in "The Dark Eternal Night," which is probably my favorite tune on the album. Got to see them do that on the 40th anniversary. Thought that was incredible to see. Um, you've also got Repentance, which is part 4 of the 12-step suite, which we'll talk about in a little bit. That's a whole nother topic right there. But yeah, very, very strong album. I quite like it. A lot of Dream Theater fans might rank it a little bit lower on the totem pole, but I've spent a lot of time with this album. Especially either going for a run or going for a bike ride, working out at the gym. This is one of the go-tos just because it's so, it's heavy in a lot of spots. Very, very good album. Let me see. I'm just taking a look here at my list here. You know what? I'm missing an album. Wait a minute. Let me just I got to look at something really quick here. I think I'm missing an album. Crap, I said 15 studio albums. They were 16. My bad. So I got to do this again. This is what happens when you go live. I completely missed an album. All right, so my bad. This is what happens when you go live. And also when you're trying to go off of memory, like, you let one slip through the cracks, and I did. So I'm just going to quickly count down from 16, not 15. My bad. And then I'm going to have to edit the description on this. All right, so 16 is When Dreaming Day Unite. 15 is The Astonishing. 14 is A View from the Top of the World. 13 is Falling into Infinity. 12 is A Dramatic Turn of Events. 11 is Dream Theater, self-titled. 10 is Distance Over Time. 9 is Images and Words. 8 is Awake. 7 is Systematic Chaos. All right, now we get to number 6. All right, I've corrected myself. Done. I know. Oops. That's the fun part about doing this live. Oops. All right. So 7 was Systematic Chaos. Number 6, I'm going to go with Train of Thought from 2003. This is probably their heaviest album. So if you really want to hear the metal side of Dream Theater, this is the album to go for. There's, I think, 7 tunes. 7 tunes. Most of them are probably going to be about 10 minutes long. There's only a couple of them that are under 10 minutes. But it starts off with As I Am, and it goes into This Dying Soul, into Endless Sacrifice, into Honor Thy Father. Vacant, you've got a little bit of a dip in dynamics, into Stream of Consciousness, which is an amazing instrumental, and then to the epic In the Name of God. It's an onslaught, other than the track Vacant. Onslaught of a metal album. And I'm not the biggest metal fan of the world, but I would say this is like the first album that I listened to from them, other than maybe the Live at Budokan DVD, which was done on this particular tour. So I heard the songs on that first before, getting into this album. And every song, I believe, was done on that DVD except for 2 of them. So I was already familiar with the album, and I already knew what I was getting into when I got it. But yeah, again, if you're into the metal side of prog metal, that would be the one I would go for. So number 6, Train of Thought. Very, very good album. Number 5 is going to be Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from a Memory from 1999. The first album with Jordan Rudess on keyboards. So what happened was Mike Portnoy and John Petrucci end up doing a side project called Liquid Tension Experiment. They record 2 albums. They invite Jordan as well as Tony Levin on bass. And this wasn't the first time the band encountered Jordan. After Kevin Moore left the band in '94, Jordan was one of the keyboard players that they tried out. They offered him the gig, and he ended up going with the Dixie Dregs because he wasn't sure, where Dream Theater was going to go. Plus, he had a steady job working for, working at Kurzweil, and he also had an offer from the Dixie Dregs to do a short, tour with them. So he ended up going with, going that direction. So that's when the band got Derek Sherinian. But as soon as they got Jordan, they said, "All right, Derek, we're going to let you go. We're bringing in Jordan, and Jordan's been with the band ever since." So Scenes from a Memory started off as about a 26-minute demo of Metropolis Part 2. So originally, when the band recorded Metropolis Part 1 for Images and Words, the Part 1 was kind of a joke. I don't think they ever intended to make a Part 2 until, I guess there was a lot of, kind of pressure from the fans. Hey, when are we going to get Metropolis Part 2? And then boom, here it is in a concept album, and a brilliant concept album at that. Brilliant in that you can listen to it from start to finish, but the songs, also work well, on their own. And I've got to see them do, a couple of things. I saw them twice. I saw them on the Distance Over Time tour. So they did like 4 tunes from that album plus a couple other tunes. Then they played the entire Scenes from a Memory album, and it would have been the 20th anniversary of the album, so 2019. So they did the whole album from start to finish. So I got to see that. Granted, it was with Mike Mangini, but it was still great to see. And then for the 40th anniversary tour, they did a couple tunes, Overture 1928 and Strange Deja Vu, and then they ended with The Spirit Carries On. So you've got a collection of songs here that work well in the concept, and it's a story. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't heard the album, but go listen to the album. And if you're still confused, you might want to go online and see if you can find the story for the album, because it does take some turns. But it's a very, very well done concept album compared to the one that we talked about a while ago, The Astonishing, which is one that's done maybe not so well. But, great, great concept album. So that's at number 5. Number 4, I'm going to go with 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. So a double album. This was 2002. So 2 discs. Disc 1 has 5 songs, which probably range from about 7 to about maybe 10 or 11 minutes. Starts off with The Glass Prison, which is the first of 5 songs in Mike Portnoy's 12-step suite. So he was kind of he was recovering from alcohol, from being an alcoholic. And he decides, okay, I'm going to take the next 5 albums and I'm going to dedicate a song on each album to the 12 steps. And the 12 steps are split across these 5 songs. So in a way, you've got a concept album within 5 albums, super, super, super cool to see. And hear, actually. I highly doubt they're ever going to do it live, but I definitely want to go see that. So it starts off with The Glass Prison. Couple other highlights for me. I love Misunderstood. That's kind of my theme song because I deal with autism spectrum disorder and, anxiety. And, when you're somebody, outside of that, not knowing about, what's going on mentally inside my head, yeah, I can come off as, not being understood properly. So I can definitely relate to lyrical matter in this particular song. But yeah, when you get to the second disc, that's one 42-minute song split into 8 parts, and it talks about 6 different types of, mental illnesses, autism being one of them. But you've got bipolar, you've got, schizophrenia, you've got postpartum depression, all different kinds of, aspects into this big, epic tune. And the whole song takes some different twists and turns musically. It's actually done live on the 2006 Score concert, which was the 20th anniversary of Dream Theater. And they wind up doing that with a small orchestra, which was really cool to see. But yeah, I love this album. It takes so many twists and turns, and the heaviness of the first couple of tunes on this album inspired the band to go and do the Train of Thought album. But anyway, yes. So 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence at number 4. Number 3, I'm going to go with Octavarium from 2005. So this is another concept album, but it's a different kind of a concept. The concept of a musical album. So this is Dream Theater's 8th studio album. And I think to that point, they have done 5 live albums. So if you think about a keyboard, you have from 1 to 8, you have from C to C, 8 notes. And then sharps and flats, you have 5. So 8 studio albums, 5 live albums. So the concept is an octave, and you can hear it in the whole album if you listen to the album from beginning to end. The first song, The Root of All Evil, and even in the title, first note in the octave is called the root, and then the last note is called the octave. So The Root of All Evil opens the song. Octavarium closes the song. So from F to F, and then each song in the album steps up a key, and then there's a little tiny sound effect in between each song that kind of bridges it. So between Root of All Evil and The Answer Lies Within, you've got a wind sound in the key of F sharp, for example. But if you listen through each song is going to step up, in a key. This song has some more of the concise kind of pop elements of Dream Theater. So songs like I Walk Beside You, The Answer Lies Within, and then Never Enough, are a bit more concise. And then you've still got an onslaught of stuff like Panic Attack, and then Sacrifice Sons is pretty proggy. Root of All Evil continues the 12-step suite from Train of Thought. So that would be part 3. And then Octavarium is like this 24-minute epic, masterpiece of a tune. I got to see them do that live in 2024. Was it 2020? No, it was 2025. I went to see that. But yeah, this was the second album that I fell in love with, so that's why it's so high up on my list. Because it contains all different aspects of what Dream Theater is about. So that's number 3. Number 2, I'm going to go with their most recent Parasomnia from 2025. So this is a thematic concept album about various sleep disorders. It's a pretty dark and heavy album, but it's a memorable album. So unlike A View from the Top of the World from 2021, or I probably only maybe remember 1 or maybe 2 songs off that album, this one I found it really immediate. As proggy as it is, as heavy as it is, I found a lot of it to be just immediately engaging. And the concept just works really well. And it's another concept album where you can listen to it from beginning to end, but the songs, if you listen to them separately, the songs can stand on their own, quite well. But yeah, this is an incredible album. Like I said, it's my number 2 favorite album right now. It would have been Octavarium before this one comes out. So yeah, Parasomnia number 2. I gotta say the highlight for me is on the song "Bend the Clock." It's a ballad, but done very, very well, and ends with an amazing John Petrucci guitar solo. Wait, you're talking about guitar and you're a keyboard player. I can like guitar too. I wish I could play guitar. I could play guitar as good as I play keyboards. There'd be no stopping me. But sadly, I can't. All right, so now we're going to get to my number 1, which is going to be Black Clouds and Silver Linings from 2009. This was the last studio album with Mike Portnoy before he left for 13 years. I remember hearing this album immediately falling in love with it. It's a really dark album. Um, they went like maybe I don't want to say gothic in a way, but maybe I'm getting that from the choir sounds that Jordan's using, which come from Omnisphere, by the way. Um, but yeah, like they went for the jugular as far as like the dark element on this album. So good. Starts off with A Nightmare to Remember, which was written about a car accident that John Petrucci had. Um, did I go and see them? Yeah, I did see them do that song in 2019 um, on the Distance Over Time tour. Um, just amazing song, and it takes some different twists and turns, so it's not heavy all the way through. Then you get to A Rite of Passage, and then you get to Wither, which was the single off the album. And that just the lyrics talk about the process of songwriting for John Petrucci. Um, you get to a song called The Shattered Fortress, which is the last part of the 12-step suite that I mentioned earlier. And then you've got, I think, perhaps my favorite Dream Theater song, The Count of Tuscany, which basically is a fictionized, kind of blown up story about John Petrucci's visit to Tuscany at, I forget when it was, but he tells the whole story about it. But he kind of made it like this cool, mystical kind of tale, going into a wine cellar and whatever. But you can hear a little bit of Metallica influence on one of the riffs on that. But yeah, it's a brilliant piece that takes so many cool, twists and turns. Yeah, I probably out of these albums, the Black Clouds and Silver Linings is the one that I go to, I think the most. Um, and I think probably because it's got my favorite Dream Theater song, of all time on that album. But yeah. All right. So, my earlier error aside, when I said there were 15 albums, there are 16 albums. So I'm going to go ahead and rattle them off really quickly, and then we'll go ahead and call this a stream. So, number 16, When Dream and Day Unite. Number 15, The Astonishing. Number 14, A View from the Top of the World. Number 13, Falling into Infinity. Number 12, A Dramatic Turn of Events. Number 11, Dream Theater, self-titled. Number 10, Distance Over Time. Number 9, Images and Words. Number 8, Awake. Number 7, Systematic Chaos. Number 6, Train of Thought. Number 5, Scenes from a Memory. Number 4, 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. Number 3, Octavarium. Number 2, Parasomnia. And number 1, Black Clouds and Silver Linings. So that is my Dream Theater ranking. Yeah, there's a lot of catching up. I don't know, Jeff, which ones you've heard. But I would say, I mean, if you remember any of the albums that you've heard, um, I would say if you haven't heard like anything in my top 5, check those out. Those are those are probably my go-tos. Like I said, Black Clouds and Silver Linings is probably like I said, it's been my go-to. I think, I know I went on this cruise a couple of weeks ago for about 8 days, and they have a fitness center on board, and I spent a lot of time in there. And I was probably cranking Black Clouds and Parasomnia. I think I was going for those two the most. Anytime I was, on the treadmill or on the bike or whatever, and doing whatever in that gym. But yeah, so that's going to be my ranking. If anybody's watching and you're a Dream Theater fanatic, please excuse the error before for me completely botching it and missing train of thought. This is what happens when you do things live. Yeah, Octavarium's great. I would say from there, I would say from there, go check out go check out Scenes from a Memory. Make that like the next one you check out, and then I don't know, message me on Facebook because you know I know who you are. But anyway, message me on Facebook and let me know what you think of that one. But like I said, I got to see them play that one live. Absolutely amazing. And I would say for anybody that hasn't seen Dream Theater live, if you ever get the chance to go, go. You won't be disappointed at all. But anyway, so that's going to be my ranking. If you're watching this on replay, go ahead and put in the comments, you know, what your ranking is. I'd love to, you know, check that out and get your thoughts. All right, so that's going to do it for this stream. If you like this or any other video on my channel, whether I'm talking music or doing a live stream or doing a gear review, be sure to subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell. You'll get notified anytime I go live or release a video. I don't have a set schedule. This stuff will happen kind of pretty much whenever I feel like it, but I will try to get content to you. I will try to get content to you in a timely manner. All right, and also if you want to help support the channel financially, go ahead and make a purchase on my Bandcamp site. I do have a new EP, the first part of my Seasons series, which was going to be called Solstice. I've changed it to Tempus, which is Latin for time or season. But Tempus Volume 1 is out on Bandcamp now. So go ahead and check that out and possibly make a purchase. That'll definitely help, you know, keep this channel going. But yeah, if you want to check out my Bandcamp, where am I? Right. Yeah, you see it right there. It's just kind of scrolling by like a little mouse. Yeah, I'm having a hard time keeping up. Yeah, there, right over there. There it is again. You get the idea. All right. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time. Take care.